Welcome, Secretary Kenney. Thanks for joining me on New Mexico in Focus.
Thank you for having me.
So, as we're taping this in mid-June, New Mexico is experiencing crazy heat. There's wildfires. We're watching reservoirs and rivers drop. Climate change impacts are everywhere in the state, and you can feel it today. As part of Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham's efforts on climate change, she had directed the New Mexico Environment Department as well as other agencies to work on cutting greenhouse gas emissions. And today I'd like to talk a little specifically about efforts on cutting emissions from the oil and gas industry. What are sort of the most robust pieces of that for the Environment Department?
The New Mexico Environment Department is focusing on issuing rules that would limit emissions from oil and gas operations. Those will not only benefit local air quality, but they'll also address climate impacts as well. We hope to take those rules to the Environmental Improvement Board, which is essentially the last stop before they're adopted in September of this year. The other thing we're doing is we're making sure we're getting out into the field using whether it's people or technology to ensure that oil and gas operators are complying with their existing permits. And we're seeing widespread non-compliance, which tells us those rules are really essential.
So let's talk about the inspectors part first. When they're not in compliance, kind of what does that look like on the ground, and what does that mean either for the climate or local communities?
When an oil and gas operation is not in compliance, it could be a number of different things. So not all sort of violations are equal. But what we'll tend to see and what we're most concerned about are those that release emissions into the air, because those are the ones that impact frontline communities and adversely affect our air quality. So those are the ones that we consider the most grave. And what that can look like on the ground is you can sometimes hear it, you can sometimes smell it, you can sometimes see stuck equipment or broken pipes, things like that. But oftentimes you need these infrared cameras that will help you actually visualize it. It'll make an invisible plume visible. And those are really helpful in our compliance efforts.
So there's tens of thousands of wells in New Mexico. How does anybody keep up with all of those?
Yeah, there's, again, two answers to that question is one, based on our resources, we can't. So we make we prioritize when we see a problem. As I said, those that are causing actual emission problems are our highest priority, and we try to tackle those as quickly as possible. We have about 7 air inspectors and 1 attorney for the whole state of New Mexico to handle anything that's a violation of an air quality permit or rule, not just oil and gas. So we have to be judicious about how we proceed. We've relied also on the Environmental Protection Agency to help us with not only collecting evidence, but then also helping us with the litigation components of it, provided a company doesn't want to settle. So that's one area that we focus on. And the other is to ensure that we use as much technology as possible. And that helps us save the human capital component. So something like a flyover in a helicopter or a plane where we can cover huge amounts of territory in an afternoon. That's another way in which we do our compliance inspections.
And then on the ozone rule, which, am I correct that by cutting these emissions, you're cutting these sorts of greenhouse gases that are affecting our climate, and then these sort of localized pollutants, it's cutting both of those. How does that work? Is it mandating that oil and gas operators make certain types of changes?
Yeah, so our 2-year process that got us to this point of being collaborative with both industry and NGOs, I think, and the public, allowed us to come up with a rule that has a lot for everybody, if you will. And the proposed rule, the rule we're taking for adoption, focuses on sort of the bigger emitters as well as the smaller emitters, and gives a foundational basis that everybody has to, again, this is the proposal, that everybody has to comply with leak detection and repair requirements, ensure that their equipment is not leaking and causing problems. There will be some, based on the emissions that a particular well site could emit, there are requirements then to add on controls and to maintain those controls. It's not set it and forget it. So we've really tried to figure out the best way in which we could gain emission reductions in the rule. So there's a little bit for everybody in the rule, if you will.
So I have heard industry often complains they're overregulated in New Mexico, particularly in thinking about the Permian Basin, which is in Texas and New Mexico. Is there a danger if New Mexico enacts regulations like this one that operators could just move over the border to Texas? Or
Yeah, so Laura, again, that's a good question. The way we're handling that is, one, I've been in contact with the TCEQ, the Texas equivalent of the Environment Department, and we are working on some collaborative efforts to ensure that we're equally holding the industry accountable on both sides. But the bigger point here to make is that air quality is regulated at the federal level on a basin, and New Mexico and Texas share that basin. So as air quality continues to diminish, which it is and has been for quite some time, the feds will come in and ratchet everybody down. So thinking about moving from New Mexico to Texas doesn't solve the air problem that we have between our two states. It only would aggravate it if somebody moved there because there are less controls or less enforcement. I think most companies that we've talked to are proud to be in New Mexico and they want to do right by the state. And they're saying that because they live here and their investors are focused on climate as well. So in a lot of ways, you could think where some people criticize that we're pushing industry out, their investment is valued even more so by their reductions here.
if enacted, if promulgated, how long, what kind of a timeline are we looking at for this rule in terms of actually on the ground changes and tightening up of those emissions?
So if the rule were adopted at our September hearing and moved forward from there, we're looking at those rules being effective in the spring of the following year. And that means that almost instantly, industry would have to begin performing leak detection and repair. They would have to quantify their emissions, and they would have to, those changes would instantly start helping our air quality. So hopefully in the spring of next year, we will be on target.
So I'm curious, is this all fast enough in terms of what scientists are telling us we need to do in terms of stopping greenhouse gas emissions, transforming away from fossil fuel economy? I realize this rule is one part of that, but are we moving fast enough as a state, as a society, as a species?
I think we could always move a lot faster in focusing on climate change. And in many ways, we're very proud of what we've done in this administration with the backdrop of an unexpected global pandemic happening as well. But that doesn't, we never stopped working on our climate efforts, which is a point of pride for both my colleague at Sarah Cottrell-Probst and myself as the co-chairs of the Climate Change Task Force. And we continue to make it a whole of government effort. So it's not just two people working on it, it's every agency. But that said, we need as much grassroots as we do, statewide and federal leadership. And that's why we've kicked off a number of things this summer to bring more communities into the fold to get those better ideas and to keep them floating forward.
Great. Secretary Kenny, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.